All right, everybody. Welcome to Parker Live. My name is Jacob Rhodes. I'm Senior Vice President at Parker Staffing Services here in Seattle. Wanted to thank you for joining us today. Our goal is a short 15-20 minute informal broadcast where we talk to someone basically with the goal of bringing a little bit of goodness to you on your day, help you recharge, and maybe kind of learn something that you didn't know before. So today I'm very happy to say that we have Andrew McMasters joining us. He's the founder of Jet City Improv and Improv Mindset, which focuses on communications, team building, and presentation support for businesses. Andrew is an actor, a director, and entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience. He's worked with multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Amazon, GE, Apple, and Nike. And currently with Improv Mindset, Andrew is dedicated to experiential learning, providing opportunities for people to have self-discovery and really kind of using creativity to drive innovations in our everyday lives. So thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. I kind of, as I was going through your bio and I looked at experiential learning, that kind of perked my ears a little bit. So let me ask, what do you mean by experiential learning?
Sure. I think we all sort of learn in various different ways. I have found for myself, the joke I say all the time is about reading that book about a workout program and you go, oh man, what a great program. I can't wait to start it. It doesn't actually become part of your process. Instead, what I like to do is we get on our feet and we try something. We do an exercise. We play a game. Then we take that experience and we go, okay, let's debrief this. What was it like? What did you learn from it? How can we apply that towards our business and towards what we do on a day-to-day activity? So that way you're sort of putting that physical feeling of what it's like to try the skill. And then we start to use the adaptation. So it's both the physical and the intellectual concept of how we might use it blended together.
Okay, so it's like learning how to swim, not from a book but by getting in the pool.
Right. I mean, you can't learn how to ride a bike by reading a book. So you got to get on it. You got to do it. So this is the same thing. And I think the same thing is true for a lot of the skills that we practice all the time and what make us successful in our everyday work.
And that probably also means making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, right?
Oh, of course. Obviously, I have a friend of mine who actually worked in Detroit for years and did a bunch of automotive engineering and talked about, well, mistakes will hurt people and mistakes will cost lives. Sure. So you want to make sure your mistakes are sort of micro learning, right? How can I do these little micro tests here and there? How can I make sure that I can continue to learn from it? And that's kind of the main lesson that I had behind improv too, is what did I learn from it? Great. How do I take that? How do I build on it? How do I take that? How do I keep going?
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting thing that you said right there. So how do you move from running an improv theater to, consulting in the business world and speaking to companies?
Sure. Actually, a lot of it had to do with work that I was doing before. I did a lot of messaging for Microsoft, for Apple Computer. My job was to stand in front of a crowd of 1,000 people and to say, hi, I work at Microsoft. I wrote this software. Let me show you how it works. And then I would demo it. And afterwards, people would say, oh, could you tell me more? And I'd go, let me hand you over to someone who actually knows what they're talking about because I'm an actor. Thank you. And I started to realize that they were hiring me because the people who had spent 5 years of their lives developing the software were too afraid to stand in front of people and talk about their work. So that realization came to me. I started taking those same exercises that I used to train actors for Jet City Improv and started adapting them and changing them and saying, how can we use these exercises, these skills, these ideas in order to help people to stand in front of others, to be present, to be clear, to work better with their teammates. So that's sort of how that whole process came together.
Okay, so because not everyone could be a Steve Jobs wearing a turtleneck, walking like this, talking to the stage, right? Everyone has a different thing that they bring.
And even Steve Jobs had training. People helped him to get that, right? There might be something that is initially a charisma that someone has when they're on stage. That's great. However, that presence, that sort of showing up, that can be taught. So we work with how that shows up. And the same thing is true whether you're on stage in front of 1,000 people or you're having a meeting in front of 5. How do you show up? How do you act as a leader? How do you present yourself? Those are the same skills.
So you had talked about teaching them and using some improv tools. So what are some things that people can, how do they apply it? What are some things that you do?
Yeah. The biggest pieces that I work with starting more than anything else is about listening. How do we listen? In what ways do we listen? Are we constantly listening to say, let me fix this problem and get this person out so that way I can get back to my work? Or are we listening to say, how do I help this person to get better than I ever was at that stage, right? How do I help this person to continue to grow? How do I serve this person? So I talk a lot of times about how do we listen, and are we just listening to solve, or are we listening to help that person reflect back to what it is? Or are we being a sounding board? Are we listening for the emotional content so that we can actually make a connection with them?
Mm-hmm.
And then continuing to figure out how we move forward from that spot. So it kind of all starts in the basis, how we listen, and then what we do with what we've been able to hear.
So as opposed to listening and then thinking about your retort or your response while the person's talking, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay. What about for, go ahead.
Sorry, one of the first things that I teach people all the time is being able to say, okay, well, this is what I heard from you. Is that correct? So that at least we start to go, I understood this, or I heard you. And then even being able to say, wow, that sounds really frustrating. Start to naming the emotional content that you're hearing, because then that starts to build your own EQ and makes an emotional connection with the other person. So we're starting to build a way to have small little structures of communication that can help people to get closer and get connected.
So I can see that working really well for, let's say, a manager who's leading a meeting with his people. But what about someone who maybe is just starting their job? They're maybe not a manager. They're in a meeting. They're being asked to look at all these numbers. How can they take some of these tools to help them out?
I believe it's kind of the same level on that. Being able to say, oh, okay, so you're asking me to do these things. Let me make sure I've got all of this clear so that I'm clear on what it is you're asking me to do. Even that clarity. Sometimes people who are asking don't even know what they're asking me to do. Once they've heard it back, they go, oh, hang on, let me actually amend that a little bit. Oh, great. So this is what I heard. Is that correct? Yes or no? I think they're sort of universal skills that anyone at any level can help in order to just build clarity. And that's sort of the key. How do we start with that clarity? I also think that some of that listening, especially when we talk about the emotional content, that immediately starts to get people to say, wow, this person is good in the sense of they're a leader. You know, there's someone who I can trust. There's someone who I could actually continue to move up the ladder in a little ways. So I think they're helpful.
Okay. And I could see that definitely being the link to improv, because listening is kind of key to what you guys do there, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. The other big lesson is about whatever you've heard, being able to accept that and then being able to build on it. So the shorthand that people say for that is yes and. It really is about accepting what happened and then building on it. This sort of goes back to what you were talking about earlier too, about failing. If something went wrong and it didn't work out, you go, okay, that didn't work. What did I learn from it? Great. How do I build on that? So anything has the ability to say yes and to build on, to accept, to build, regardless of what it is.
Okay. What so those are some good tools for people that are, working and listening, obviously being a big one. But you also mentioned when I talked to you earlier that you also have some exercises or suggestions for people preparing for a job interview. That's probably the most nerve-wracking point for a person up until they start, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. And there's a couple different exercises that I've done with people before. Some pieces that are literally about how do I stay on message? Okay. If you want to, do you want to play a little fun game?
Sure.
Great, let's do it. Okay. So I like to start with the difficult part, and then we work our way back to the part that's easy. So the difficult part is called three-legged dog. Okay. So what will happen is you get to ask me any question at all, like, what did you have for breakfast or anything? And you ask me, and then during my answer, I'm going to reply, and I'm going to insert the words three-legged and dog. They don't have to be in that order. They don't have to be sequential, right? It's just me practicing shoehorning a couple of words in to any question I'm asked. So go ahead, ask me a question.
Okay. Where's your favorite vacation spot?
Oh, I have about 3 different favorite vacation spots. Yeah. And most importantly, I like to go places that where I can actually go out and run and walk, because I'm pretty long-legged, right? And then also I like to have places that I can bring my dog. So that's an important thing. So usually the beach is one of my favorites.
All right. Great.
So that's the idea. The next step on that after you practiced it, which again is just funny, ridiculous, is how do I take the 3 words that I feel I provide as an individual for value when I show up to work? So what are the 3 things that I sort of believe that I can do, right? My ability to follow through with things, my ability to communicate with people. And then I write those 3 things down. And now when you're in the interview and you get those ridiculous questions like, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? You can actually go back and you can say, okay, well, let me answer that. And let me put in the words about who I am and about my values so that I'm telling you a little bit something about myself in the answer to this question.
Okay.
So that's kind of the goal on it. And it's sort of that fun game of we start very difficult with 3-legged dog because that's tough. And then we work our way back to what are my values? What do I believe in? What do I think I provide for a worker, for someone here, for a company?
So that in and of itself, though, would require some prep work and introspection, right?
Yeah, certainly does.
Across about me to this person that's interviewing me, right?
Yeah. Looking at yourself and saying, what is it that I actually can provide for this company? And how do I show up? It was an interesting thing. I was working at Nike a while ago and was teaching a bunch of engineers to show up in front of the higher ups at Nike. And the one thing I asked them was, well, what are you sharing with them? And they said, well, we're telling them about these things that went wrong. And then we're telling them the solutions we came up with. And I said, okay, so why are you afraid of that? And they're like, well, because they're really high up. And I'm like, yeah, but don't they want to hear what you have to say? And then they went, yeah, they want to hear what I have to say. So even I think sometimes people walking into interviews going, hey, I'm here. I think you want to hear what I have to say. And also, let's find out if this is a good fit for me, as well as me being a good fit for you, right? This is an equal way that we walk in. That's just showing your own confidence and your own presence and saying, hey, I have a lot to offer. Let's see if this is a good fit.
That's really interesting because I recruited for probably 10 years and I recruited test engineers for contracts over and the world's largest software company on the east side. And and one of the things, we don't always prep people for the interview. We'd say, okay, here are the requirements, here's who you're meeting with. But we never really go to the sense of, okay, what do you feel that you want to communicate to the manager? Like we don't do any of that type of prep work. And I think that's an area that recruiters can help their candidates do better in the job interview by talking about that.
Yeah, and that leads directly into the Morabian studies. If you look up on Wikipedia, Albert Morabian, one of the things that he talks about is 55% of what people are hearing is the physicality that person shows up with. 38% is the vocal quality, the intonation of the voice. And then 7% is the words, the content. So if you're not showing up fully with who you are, then people are losing out on that message. There's a couple different pieces about the Morabian study. You have to read it. That actually comes into place when I'm not sure if I trust who you are or what you're coming in with, which I think fits in with a job interview status.
Okay. And I think what we'll do is we usually do a post-interview write-up about this. So I'll make sure I get that information. I'll pop the link on Wiki so anyone interested in learning more will be able to kind of see that. Well, so we're on a Zoom call right now, and I know improv is very much being in the same room and trying to figure out the other person and communicate. So how does that work in this era of Zoom calls? Like, what can people do to show up?
I think the same thing is true. And in fact, for Zoom calls, it's a little bit more difficult because we have to be able to focus into the camera. We have to be able to be present, show up. The vocal variety, the vocal quality is very important. We have to make sure we're varied up a little bit in order to sort of show that life and personality that we have. The physicality is a little bit different. It sort of is going into what does the camera see and how does that work? I mean, you'll even notice on my setup, I've got a small light on the back of my head, sort of a key light between myself and the dark background. I like the dark background because I want you focusing on me, not focusing on my pictures behind me or anything else.
Good point.
So I have a lot of different setups that I sort of use, especially when I'm presenting for people or teaching. I want that focus on who I am and what I'm saying.
But you'll actually change the background depending on what the type of meeting you're going into.
I can, yeah, and that's sort of the key. Not to like put the dungeon background up, but that sort of thing. It's I can put up whatever I want to and sort of make it look fun.
Right. Okay. So, one of the things is kind of prepping on the background, making sure you're there. In terms of what about the larger group meetings? Now we have a morning meeting every morning on Zoom where it's 20 people, right? And you're trying to talk and you're trying to read other people. Any tips for that in terms of communicating to a group?
Yeah. I'm actually working with a consulting group on Friday about engagement tools so that you can start to use all of the engagement tools that you have in Zoom or WebEx or Adobe Connect and all of that. Chat rooms, how we use that, annotating on the screen, polls, reactions, all of those fun things. Part of it is, I think the biggest lesson that is good for people to understand is assuming positive intent. Right. We are in a tough spot and people are isolated and they're at home and half of them aren't wearing pants while they do their Zoom call. So we have to sort of assume positive intent, and that if people are interrupting each other, it's because they're passionate about it and they care. So taking more time to listen, taking more time to reflect back, repeat what was heard, really kind of keeping everything positive and up, because it's fatiguing. It's difficult having these video calls constantly.
Yeah, always being on. And one thing from my perspective is just making sure if you're in a group call that as the person leading the call, making sure you identify people individually and asking for their input has helped a lot too.
Yeah, I have found giving them time as well. So in other words, if I'm calling you, I'd say, well, Jacob, I want to talk to you about this. Let me describe what it is I'm thinking and what these pieces are. So I'm giving you time to formulate your reply before I come back to you and ask the question. Those sorts of things are just helpful to keep people feeling comfortable as opposed to feeling put on the spot in a moment.
And that makes sense. One of the things that you lose not being face-to-face in the office is you ask someone a question to get the information that you're looking for so you can both kind of complete the project and move on. Yeah. But what you forget about is leading up to that question is, how was your weekend? How are you feeling today? What's going on? And with Zoom calls, a lot of times you just pop in, you ask, and you pop out. So that can be really challenging.
Yeah. I've talked about for larger meetings as well. It's the same as if you were having a meeting around a table. People would say, oh, I've got this information for you here on the table. By the way, the bathrooms are down the hallway. There's coffee over here. If you want to have, cookies, they're here. Taking that moment on the virtual call to say, hey, let's show you what these engagement tools are. Let me show you where the chat is. Let's go over these pieces first. It's the same thing as if you were doing a face-to-face meeting, only now it's just different tools.
Right. That's a really good point. Well, we kind of hit our window here, and this is great. I know. So what I'm hoping to do is that people watching this, if they want to learn more, if they're running a team and maybe Zoom hasn't been going as well as they had hoped it would be in the remote work, that they can learn enough here to pique their interest and reach out to you for some more information. So what's the easiest way that someone can contact you, Andrew?
Best way is on the website. There's contact forms there, or email me. It's improvmindset.com, and it's andrew@improvmindset.com. So contact me. Let's talk. Let me see how I can help.
And we'll make sure to have everything annotated in the chat so people can see and click on a link if make it that easy to do it.
Great.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I had a great chat. It seems like we can probably go for a full hour if we needed to. There's a lot of questions to ask, but
next time. That's all right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. You have a good day.
Great. Thank you. Bye.